Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith, and today I'm bringing you a review of Escape Pod, the collection of short stories celebrating the 15th anniversary of the podcast of the same name. Ba-na-na-na-na-na-na. It's going over here where it's out of focus, but I can still talk about it. Before we start, a few disclaimers. Yes, I was sent a free copy of this book for review from the publisher. Nobody is paying me to talk about books. All opinions are my own. I'm not really sure how you would spoil a short story, but no spoilers here. I will also say, in case you click off the video before you start this, content warning for the first two stories of the book. They both deal with difficult childbirth. We'll come on to that later, but in case that you got distracted and wanted to pick this up, that's my content warning for you right there. What is this book? What's Escape Pod? Escape Pod is a sci-fi short story podcast that started 15 years ago. There have also been horror and fantasy spin-offs. I'll confess, I don't actually listen to this podcast. I'm not much of a podcast person. The only podcast I do listen to is Justine over I Should Read That's podcast that she does with her sister. You're Never Gonna Read This, which I will link below. But maybe this book will sell me on it. Will this bind up of short stories by various contributors to the podcast over the years be what tips me over the edge? You'll have to keep watching and find out. The book features contributions from a huge variety of authors who I will try and link in the description, but suffice to say the names that caught my eye when the review request came through for this book were N.K. Jemisin and Sarah Gailey, two authors I know and love. In the UK, this is already out and it's out from Titan Books. Normally in a review video I would go into the plot summary at this point, but it's a short stories collection, so there isn't one. Is this the first short story compilation that I'm doing a video for? Well, ain't that something? The difficult thing about reviewing a collection like this is there are always going to be stories that you personally don't like and that somebody else will love. They are a mixed bag, that's kind of the point. In all of my time, I've never read a short story collection where I've been like, 100% of that was 5 stars for me. Wonderful, let's go. So I thought rather than go blow by blow, story by story with what I liked and what I didn't like, instead, I would share with you some of my favourites and why I enjoyed them. I am going to look at my notes for these partly because it's just a little bit helpful to remember the names for the titles. There's one by John Scalzi which is Alien Animal Encounters, and this is a collection of kind of women on the street interviews transcribed into this story. So the idea is that this is a world where humanity now has regular contact with alien animals of some kind. And this story, oh so humorously and also oh so humanly, captures exactly what that would look like and just how awful humanity would be. Because yes, of course, somebody would try to do that to an alien animal. Oh, it's too real. There were 2 stories in this collection that made me cry, and one of them was Mary Robinette Kowal's Jaden's Weaver, and this is a story about a young girl who really, really wants a teddy bear spider, which is neither a teddy bear nor a spider, but something that kind of looks maybe a bit like both of them. It's just one of those stories that even though it's completely science fiction, it still feels so relatable. I don't know, it like spoke directly to my inner child. There was something about it. Absolutely beautiful, made me cry, one of my favourites. The other story that made me cry was by Tina Connolly. This was Lions and Tigers and Girlfriends. Is anyone surprised that I like the story about the young gay woman setting up a theatre group on her spaceship so that they can put on Wizard of Oz? No, nobody is surprised about this. This one really awakened the theatre kid in me. There was something about it, but also what I really liked about this is it's a really simple premise and it does what a short story does really well, and it just hammers down on a particular issue in a really subtle way. Can you be a subtle hammer? I guess you can now, but it taps into something really beautiful and I really, really enjoyed it. And it made me cry. It would be weird to mention that I requested a book because Sarah Gailey was in it and then didn't mention their story. Their story is called Tiger Lawyer Gets It Right. I don't want to talk too much about this one because I think it's one to read for yourself if you're going to pick this up. It is one to experience, but I don't know how the election went when I'm filming this, but I think some of the energy of pre-election, there was some very satisfying elements to this story about a tiger doing some stuff that I just think it was very good, and it tapped into something in my brain, and I appreciate that I'm being very cagey about this, but I really think it's a story to read for yourself. And the last story I want to talk about is N.K. Jemisin's Give Me Cornbread or Give Me Death. And N.K. Jemisin is an exceptional writer. It is as good as you would think it was going to be if you've read any of her stuff before. There's quite a few stories in this collection that are very, very topical, which is obviously very important and very good. It's what sci-fi is very good at. But N.K. Jemisin's felt simultaneously like it was calling out some really bad stuff, but it still felt very triumphant, which I really enjoyed. and it had dragons in, and really, who am I to say no to some dragons? So I mentioned it right at the start, but I'm coming back to it now. The one thing I will say is if you are planning on reading this, the first 2 stories do feature difficult childbirth. The second one, which I think is T. Kingfisher's, deals with it in a more humorous way. It's a little bit less heavy, but the first story is quite difficult from the off. So if that's something you are sensitive to, that was your content warning from me. The book does not feature one. I think it is odd to start with such a difficult topic as an editorial decision when it's not a theme of the entire series. I think it would put me off if that was something that I wasn't interested in reading. So not a criticism of the story, not a criticism of the book, just a weird editorial choice. I just think there were better stories I would have started with, and I didn't really get a sense of why they were put in that order beyond the obvious life starts with birth kind of stuff. Normally I would do comparisons or other things to recommend here, but I actually only own one other short story compilation, and it's Tangleweed and Brine, which is a really lovely set of fairy tale retellings that I got for Christmas a few years ago. So with that in mind, I'm relying on you to provide me with some comparisons. Please let me know your favourite short story compilations in the comments below. Final thoughts. If you like science fiction and if you like short stories, or you're interested in finding some more authors you might be interested in, which I, as a person who doesn't read a lot of sci-fi, definitely was, I think this is a really good place to start. And it may have converted me to maybe picking up the podcast at some point. The only issue I have is that I am a completionist and there is 15 years worth of podcast I would have to listen to. And even at 2 times speed, that's probably more than I can possibly handle. As I said, nobody loves 100% of a short story compilation, or if you do, wonderful, but very rarely does it happen for me. However, I would say that I loved 80% of this, maybe even 90, which is pretty good going. While you're down there commenting your short story recommendations, very quickly, be sure to follow me on all of my social media, that's linked below. Then also subscribe because it makes me feel loved and appreciated. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one.